our session, our Black History session. We're going to kick off talking about money, markets in the black community. But given that we are in the house, I want to ask everybody really quickly, bow your heads. Let's just open up with a little prayer. Heavenly Father, first and foremost, thank you for getting us all here today. And please deliver us back the same way that you got us here, safely. Thank all those that are joining us online, whether they're eating their dinners or just getting off work, getting themselves settled. Allow them to find some value in the information that we'll be sharing today. Continue to be a hedge of protection around all of us, around our families, friends, and loved ones, and continue to show that through you, all things are possible for those of us that believe. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I'm Broderick Young, and this is my brother, Al Johnson, and we'd love to welcome you all here tonight to this workshop. We're going to be talking about some things that you may know about, some things that you may not know about. Prayerfully, we'll be able to navigate if there's some questions that come through online, but we definitely have some people that have trudged through a little bit of precipitation to get here this evening. So sure, they'll have some questions, and please feel free to have those conversations with us. First and foremost, quick disclaimer, this is not tax advice, legal advice, and everybody's situation is different. So if there's something that you got as a question or something you want to take offline, that's not a problem. We're always open to work with individuals based on their particular situations.
So, Brother Brod, I want to thank you for the prayer, first and foremost, and I want to welcome you all to our workshop. My name is Al Johnson, co-founder, financial advisor at Reveal Wealth with my brother Broderick here. And really quickly, we are Reveal Wealth, right? And our mission is simple. We want to reveal the financial strategies that have been used throughout history, and we're going to talk about a little bit of history tonight, to protect, accumulate, and ultimately distribute wealth, right? We wanted to create a firm that was comprised of qualified professionals that could deliver quality solutions to the communities in which we serve. And yes, that's you all, right? So without further ado, I think we'll get started.
As we often say, we don't discriminate, but we do concentrate on our people.
Yes.
And we want to make sure that our people understand we were delayed in a lot of things, but we are not deficient. Contrary to the rhetoric that you may hear about the things that are wrong with, quote unquote, the black community, we're doing a lot of things right. And we've been doing a lot of things right for a long time. However, there have been some systemic things going on that have hampered us. There have been some lack of understanding where to place assets that have hampered us. Getting a good understanding that just because you're making a lot of money, that doesn't always correlate to building wealth. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But I want to start with a little bit of history. And some of you all may know this, and some of you all may not. I subscribe that in the general market space of the Americas, whenever African Americans, black folk, however you want to describe us, were allowed to begin to participate in things that the general public participated in, things began to change. Rules began to change. As our participation increased, money was extracted from our community, and it was just a vicious cycle. And you can start all the way back with Reconstruction. Reconstruction happened. We started voting. We started showing up. Behind the scenes, there were some things that went on in Washington, D.C. Next thing you know, there's no more military to protect in the South. Jim Crow comes, we set back again. Land distribution. So when we had the land and we were trying to distribute it to our heirs, back in history, it was heir-to-heir property. It wasn't as much of the estate planning and legal documentation that we have now. So as a family here, we might have owned 40 acres of land, and it was all heir-to-heir. But my brother, he was a little shaky. So somebody got to him. And they offered him $4.73 for his portion. And with the way the laws were set up, once that person bought that portion, they could force all of us to sell the property. And they forced everybody to sell the property, and he might buy the whole thing again because it was a forced sale pushed out. Let's move on to the New Deal. Many of you all remember the New Deal. It was supposed to be a great thing. help individuals. Social Security came out of the New Deal, a lot of things that we know today. But one of the caveats that was placed in the New Deal was there was industry restrictions. So if you were a sharecropper or a domestic or someone working, you can think of it today. Even today, people working for the railroad don't get to participate in Social Security. Well, the industries that were excluded happen to be 90% of the industries that we worked in. So we really didn't get to participate in that. GI Bill, many of you are probably very familiar with that. Moral of the story, we didn't get it, right? I think only 2% of the African-American vets that came back from the war actually were able to participate in the GI Bill. Public education desegregation. Once they desegregated schools, they started to change how schools were funded. That's where we went to a property tax base. And that goes to my next thing when you look at home ownership and desegregation. So they went to a property tax base. Once they stopped redlining and said we could move into certain neighborhoods, then white flight happened. Everybody moved out of the neighborhoods. They decreased the value of our property in the neighborhoods, and we still suffer from appraisal bias, right? Then you look at fair housing. Once they started fair housing, credit scores came into play. That's when we started getting credit scores in order to be able to qualify for homes. Higher education, once they opened up higher education to everybody, we went away from a grant structure to a loan structure. Well, who got saddled with the majority of the loans? People that look like me and you. And the last one we all pretty much lived through, the mortgage crisis, right? When they expanded mortgage opportunities, what community was more prevalent to be pushed into the predatory subprime loans? Those that look like us. So in general, historically, and this isn't Broad being a conspiracy theorist, you could just look at the history of our country. When things open up and they allow us to participate at a high level, there's always seems to be kind of a caveat there, right? So where are we today?
So, Brad, before you go there, let me go back to the disclaimer for a second. You don't have to go there, because I just want to see how long it's going to take for you to get loose.
Gotcha.
This is not your normal financial presentation. Okay, my brother, he's going to keep you slightly entertained. We're going to, try to put some financial knowledge out there. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Got it.
But I'm sure they saw that by now. Go ahead.
So where are we today, right? Got some things on the slide, and I'm going to boil it down for you. There was a bill passed last year. Some people call it a big better, whatever. What it did do better than anything else was add to our deficit. The bill that was passed last year added more to the deficit of the United States than the previous 4 spending bills combined. And when you look at the United States debt, our federal debt has grown by 99% over the last 10 years. So when you look at where the money comes, where revenues come from to pay for stuff, they come from where? Taxes, right? They come from taxes. And if we keep doing what we're doing, that bottom red chart's pretty much showing you how high taxes and GDP versus the debt. And if you look at on the left-hand side, you see World War II versus where we are today. It's not a good trajectory. Why is this important? Well, most people don't know. If you look back in the 1940s, 60s, all the way up to the 80s, the highest marginal tax rate was 70% or above. 70% or above was the highest marginal tax rate. And we're going to get into this a little bit more later on in our presentation as we start talking about some strategies we can use. Here we are today, highest marginal tax rate is 37%. So back in 1979, 80, there was a bill passed, a federal tax code that most of you are probably familiar with. It was called 401k. That is the tax code. If you look up tax code 401k, you'll see what you know as an employer. Passed late 70s, early 80s. Why? Highest marginal tax bracket was 70%. There were 15 different tax brackets. If you deferred money back then to take it out today, it worked. And this is a really good time to be talking about this because we are probably all looking at taxes right now. And none of us like them, right? And if you look at what's happened over the past, 5 to 10 years or so, The government has created the ability for us to defer more into those plans than ever. Even this previous bill just opened it up to where if you're over 60, you can put even more. There used to be a catch up at age 50, but now if you're over 60, you can put even more to try to catch up, to defer and quote unquote save for your retirement. And I put that in quotes because if you're deferring all of the money today at an effective rate, most people's effective tax rate is somewhere in the 20% range.
That's right.
And I just showed you what the deficit was. If you're deferring it today to pay it later, you may be putting yourself in a conundrum. So you got to ask yourself, where are your assets? And what this study by the Federal Reserve did was it showed white households have higher allocations to equities and business ownership, greater exposure to market growth, and assets that are designed for long-term compounding. Black households have higher allocations to cash, vehicles, and their primary residence. Lower exposure to equities, and their assets are focused on stability, not growth. You've seen it in our community. I don't want to do that because I don't want to lose all my money. Right. Yet, we all know, well, you're learning tonight, that's where they got the majority of their money.
That's right.
So the probability of losing it all when it's someplace where all of them got it probably isn't that high, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about diversification. But you also need to understand that we're making more money than we ever have of the people in general, right? We got people making good money. Money determines how much you can save. But number 3 is the most important thing. Where are you saving it? Because that asset that you choose to save your money in is going to determine what compounding looks like. And compounding is truly what builds wealth. White households are positioned where growth happens. Black households are positioned where stability at best happens. Ask yourself, where do your assets sit? And if tax rates rise, what happens to you? So as we ask those 2 questions, understand that we got to switch things up, right? We got the income down, right? And that's great. We earned consistent income. For those of you who hang out with the Gen Zs, and I don't even know what's after that, they're always talking about multiple streams of income, right? I always encourage them to get a stream of income.
That's right.
Where are we putting that income? What do those assets look like? What type of structure do we have? Because the proper structure will ultimately help us with the other thing that's a very common thing to talk about in our community, legacy, AKA generational wealth. So if you want to create those things, we got to have a better strategy. We need to architect a better situation so that we're moving forward more appropriately in this environment. So my brother's going to talk a little bit about a strategy.
So, Brad, you did a great job of breaking down history, where we've come from. Now we're going to talk a little bit about where we're going, right? As financial advisors, we speak with a lot of people, and what we find out is folks in general have had some conversations, sometimes a lot of conversations around money, right? They've spoken to this person, again, have had those conversations, but rarely do we see that folks have taken action. And the reason why they haven't taken action is most likely because no one has presented them with a strategy, okay? How do we get it done? So what we're going to talk about tonight is the macro balance strategy. And I know it sounds complicated, but at the end of the day, what it really is a strategy that shows you how to coordinate your investments, your taxes, and your risk management into one unified strategy or one unified framework. In essence, how to get all of these moving parts to talk to each other for the good of your overall financial structure or your financial plan. Does that make sense? All right, perfect. So one of the things that we do as advisors is try to break down the complicated and make it really simple to understand. And one of the ways that we do that is by illustrating the fact that your financial life is a lot like a financial house. okay? Everyone in here, whether you own, rent, or other, you are familiar with what it takes to build a structure or to build a house. And everybody would most likely agree that in order to have a great structure, it needs to have a what? A good foundation, okay? And foundation means that we just want to have a structure that can withstand the storms that life may bring. And if we want to pass it on from generation to generation to generation and down the line, it needs to be strong. Now, when we're talking about financial planning, that foundation is called the protection or the risk management phase of your financial plan. And that basically means that, God forbid, emergencies come. Again, the storms of life, death, disability, the loss of income. We want to make sure that everyone can continue to remain in their own world, continue on with their standard of living. So we want to make sure that those things are taken care of first and foremost. The next stage where we're going to spend the most of our time today is the accumulation stage. So that's the fun stage. That's where we are gathering and accumulating assets, okay? We want to go back to the house analogy. That's when we're shopping for the furniture, right? We're decorating, we're making everything look good, we're entertaining. That's the fun stuff. But in terms of your financial plan, the accumulation stage is where, again, we're gathering assets effective and efficiently. Brad spoke about taxes earlier. We also want to keep a keen eye on taxation, not only on the front end, which is where most people think about taxes. You know, how much am I going to, take home this year, or how much am I going to have taken out of my check? But also, why are you smiling at him? Also, we want to think about how your assets are taxed as they grow, but most importantly, how they're going to be taxed as you take those assets out in distribution, AKA retirement, okay? So the third stage is distribution. That's where we take the assets that we hopefully have accumulated and turn those into a distribution stream that you can't outlive.
You also, in that distribution phase, that's where you're going to that next generation. So not only do you need to be cognizant of how things are going to be taxed when you're in your retirement, but you also need to understand there are certain assets that are taxed heavily when passed to the next generation versus assets that are passed to the next generation tax preferable, right? So that distribution phase, while you're accumulating, you can prepare to do that correctly, but taxation, that's the biggest fee, right? We get a question all the time. Oh, what are the fees in this account? What are the fees in this account? You'll never outfee your taxes.
Great point, Brian. So let's talk about the agenda. And as we dig through the accumulation phase, we're going to talk about what steps we take to make sure that that's a successful transition. So the first thing we're going to discuss is a financial EKG, right? Most of us have had a health event, right? Some of us may have had a health scare. And when we go to the doctor, what's the first thing that they check? They want to check our what? Our vitals, right? If we have a heart issue, they're going to make sure that we have an EKG to study and understand the health of our heart. Financial EKG does the same thing. It studies and helps us understand the health of your finances. The next thing is we're going to talk about annual asset reallocation. We're going to dig into the macro balance strategy, and then at the end of that, we're going to kind of focus on or think about how we can do some tax deductible investing, or really what it looks like if you take your time and go through those phases. So the financial EKG, we spoke about that. And what we want to do is do a case study tonight, okay? But before we get into the case study, I want you to see these two boxes on the side. So we see accumulation, and then we see distribution. I want to rename those for a second. I want you to think about accumulation as you at work, all right? And I want you to think about distribution as money at work. So what happens during the accumulation stage? We start off in the workforce, okay? And about halfway through, in an ideal world, we should be able to say, you know what? I think it's time for me to stop working. Or if I wanted to stop working right now, my money could work for me. I could put my money to work, and I can just call it quits, right? But as we know, that doesn't always happen. Some things kind of come up, right? Whether it be kid. Why are you looking at me when you say that? Kids schooling, You purchase a home. Long story short, you don't save as much as you probably should early on in those years. So then one or two things happen. We could start to level out the playing field and start to accumulate slowly. And then, some folks may come to a workshop like this and say, hey, we spoke with Al and Brad from Reveal Wealth, and they kind of opened up our eyes, and now we realize we need to start saving some money. So then you go on a steep hill in order to try to hit that goal so you can meet that money at work phase or that distribution stage. Or you continue along and just extend the amount of time that you're working, okay? And we see that a lot these days. When we speak with younger folks and we ask them when they want to retire, Brad, tell me if I'm telling the truth or if I'm lying. We speak to a 35-year-old, their retirement age is 55.
Tops.
You speak to a 40-year-old, we start at 58, 59, right? The longer it goes, we now have clients that they're still hanging on to 60, 65. We have some that have extended to 70.
Yep.
We often see some till 75, right? And that's okay.
And multiple reasons. Some of it is because some of them do need to save some more money.
That's right.
Some of it is because they've really hit strides, high income earning. And it's like they said, as long as my brain and my body right, I'm not leaving this money on the table. I'm going to go ahead and make this money. So
that's right. So, multiple reasons. And I don't know that we said it, but we'll talk about it a little here as well. Everyone's situation is different, right? So, there should be no cookie cutter strategies, no cookie cutter plans, because we're all different. We all got different stories. We all have different hopes, dreams, desires, and outcomes as well, right, as it pertains to our financial life. So we're going to move on to the case study. And for sake of an example, we're going to call this person Sam, okay? And it could be Sam, it could be Samantha, you choose. We're going to call them Sam. Sam is 40 years old, and Sam is on a good track. He or she wants to retire at age 65. So we all can do simple math. That gives them about 25 years to accomplish that retirement goal, okay? Now, Sam currently makes $125,000 a year, and this is kind of, where some consultation comes in. We speak with Sam and we say, how much retirement income or how much income do you want in retirement? Sam doesn't know, so we throw out a rule of thumb. Now, a general rule of thumb that some people use, and you may have heard of, is 80%, the 80% rule. Okay, in retirement, I should be able to live off of 80% of my income. Why do people say that? I'm no longer contributing to my 401k.
Don't have to drive someplace every day.
Don't have to drive someplace every day. Don't have to pay payroll taxes. Don't have to do drive cleaning.
Don't have to pay for parking.
Don't have to pay for parking. So 80% may work. And at the end of the day, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to travel around the world and sip margaritas or Mai Tais or whatever the case may be, 80% may not work. But if you want to stay home, you want to get into the garden, you want to do, some very simple things and enjoy yourself, 80% may be on track for you. But for Sam, we're going to go with the 80% rule and say Sam wants $100,000 in retirement. So the next thing that we need to do to figure out if Sam is going to be able to achieve her goal is we need to figure out what rate of return are we going to get on the investments that Sam's going to make to hit his number. And then also, what rate of return are we expecting in retirement? All right? We've got another rule of thumb for that. Generally, while someone is investing in their accumulation years while they're at work, we say probably a good 7-8%. And we should be able to do that in a moderately aggressive portfolio. Nothing too crazy, maybe even a balanced portfolio. Depends on how the markets are working, right? So we're going to say 7% for Sam while they're working, 4% in retirement. And a very easy way for us to come up with this number, and then their number's 2.5 million, and you wonder how we got there. We take 100,000, we divide that by 4%. That gives us $2.5 million, okay? So that's how much Sam initially needs in retirement. And we'll tell you some of these assumptions that we're working out. So I think the commercial was ING back in the day. with the big orange ball, the rolling the ball around. Everybody remember that commercial? And at the end of the thing, it says, "What is your number?" All right, that's Sam's number, $2.5 million. Now, what assumptions are we using? We're assuming that Sam did nothing. Sam has nothing, and he's starting from ground zero. In order to achieve that number, he needs to invest. Let's get to the investment number, and I'll go back to the rule of 42. Sam needs to invest $3,086 per month, okay, in order to get to the $2.5 million. Now, I did a couple of different points over there, and basically what that shows is the rule of 72. So that's important as well. Rule of 72 says that if you divide 72 by your rate of return, it's going to tell you how long it's going to take for your money to double, okay? The other way to look at that when we're talking about inflation in retirement, in this particular sense, is that if you divide 72 by your rate of return, that's also the amount of time it takes for your buying power to get cut in half, okay? So Sam needs $100,000 in retirement. Every 18 years, his buying power is going to go down by half. So that's also something that we need to consider in retirement. What $100,000 buys today, 18 years from now, it's only going to buy $50,000 and then $25,000, so on and so forth.
Which is important, why it's important to make sure your retirement assets are still keeping pace with inflation.
That's right. Yeah, and because, I mean, if we think about it, if 18
years
years
ago, we could get a steak for less.
Well, yeah, but let's look at it this way, right? 18 years ago was 2008. Think about how much a home cost in 2008. Think about how much a car cost in 2008. Think about how much it cost to go out for a nice dinner. It was about half, right? So if we were working with that 4% rate of return, that would make sense. But anyway, with Sam, we got to put away $3,000 a month. Now, here's the timeline or the starting point where that makes a difference. If Sam has 5 more years, meaning he started at age 35, that $3,086 goes down to $2,037. If he waits 5 more years, meaning he has 5 less years, he has to invest $4,798 a month to get to that $2.5 million. Okay? Now, probably scared everybody, right? But what this doesn't take into account, and we were talking about this earlier, is if, number one, Sam had any money invested before age 40, but it also doesn't take, in part, guaranteed forms of income. So let's talk about this here. Retirement is not only about assets. Retirement is about income, all right? So if Sam is we're in the DMV, if Sam is a federal government employee and Sam has a pension, right, that's going to pay him $80,000 a year, does he still need to accumulate $2.5 million? No, because his goal is to get $200,000 a year. We haven't factored in Social Security. A lot of people say Social Security is not going to be here. We believe it will be here, maybe in a different form, right? Because people are living longer, waiting longer to retire, so it may get kicked down the line a little bit. Retirement, full Social Security age may be 72 one day, right? But those are the things that haven't been accounted for in the overall equation. Moral of the story is, once we go through your financial EKG, we can figure out what your number is and then backtrack to get there, right? So, Brad, let's talk a little bit about annual asset reallocation, my brother.
So when you're looking at allocating, go ahead, bro.
Oh. Yep.
So the one thing I tell young people is before you get bad habits, begin to pay yourself first, right? Learn how to structure your lifestyle around after you save. Most of us, and I'll just talk about me, when I graduated college and started making some money, the first thing I went and did was bought me a Jaguar. And I was paying more money for the Jaguar than I was for anything else. And I made that note every month. I figured it out. And I think at its core, I thought that having that car made me worth something. I really didn't understand my own core worth. So I needed to be able to show the world I done made it. But I was making Jaguar rich. I wasn't making me rich.
That's right.
So it took some time for me to figure out. And once I got after that, I ended up having the most expensive Nissan Altima ever, because I was upside down on the Jaguar. I had to finance that into the Altima and then get that paid down, right? But I made a decision at that point that I was never going to spend more money on other things than I was spending on myself. So if I was going to buy a car and the car was going to cost me $500 a month, if I wasn't at least saving $500 a month for me, I need to go get me a car that's $250 or $300. So for young people, you are correct. If we can teach our young people that. Oh, yeah, sure. Putting it up so it's working for them.
Yeah. And brother, you bring up a good point, because when I spoke of that chart and I put that little green dot in the middle of that accumulation line, I said ideally, right? But I think the way that we get to that point is by starting investing at a very young age. You know, people often ask, if you could tell your 18-year-old self something, what would you tell them? For me, it would be put away 10%. From the moment I started, I've been working since 15 years old, right? I'm 48, about to be 49 now. If I put away 10% from the beginning, whole different ball game, right? Right now, I'm still at work, right? But some money would be at work, and I don't know, if I was working with him, I still might be at work, but you got options.
And, you know, I'll lead the preaching
got options.
Pastor Matt and Bishop Robbie, but that 10% is biblical.
Biblical.
You ask any person that's specifically black church, whose image are you created in, we're going to say God. Well, if God wants 10%, why aren't we giving 10% to ourselves when we're created in God's image, right? But it also depends on where we're putting the 10%.
That's right.
Right, so we want to make sure we're putting that 10% in the right places so it's working for
Great
us.
segue.
That's just a great segue, right? And you all have heard this. We hear it all the time. What stock should I buy? I don't know. There are over 660,000 publicly traded companies at any given time. And then when you factor in NFTs and cryptocurrency and Forex and this and that, the person that tells you they know the exact one to buy, good luck, right? However, there are different asset classes. And as you can see right here, different asset classes take a turn at winning. So some years it's large cap, some years it's small cap. You just never really know. But if you were all small cap, that's what you looked like. You know, you won 2010, you won 2016. The rest of those times, you were, mid-range, right? So one of the things that we try to explain to people is because you do have all of these options, life does not have to be. Our parents kind of messed us up when they said, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Well, yes, you can, right? It's better that way. It's the reason of having the cake, right? So don't worry about either or. There are mechanisms out here where we can buy it all. So instead of looking for the needle in the haystack, let's just buy the whole haystack, right? And if you're systematically buying the haystack, you're going to have the things at the top. But you got to make sure you're rebalancing your portfolio. Because let's say we start off here, right? We're equal weighted amongst three assets, A, B, and C. And we get a year out there, and A's killing it. A's doing great, B's not doing bad, C's our laggard. A lot of people's thought process is, man, I'm going to get rid of C, and I'm going to buy more A. Well, what you just did was you sold low and bought high. That's right. And we all know, and if you don't know, the adage is you want to buy low and sell high. So by rebalancing your portfolio appropriately, you'd actually sell A, buy some more of C, and get back into your appropriate target. And that's what's very important. Staying in your target is what helps you sleep at night. Because what happens is some of us get into portfolios and they start growing, and we love seeing what it's doing, and oh man, this thing's doing great, or this was not doing well. Markets aren't about something doing great or not. It's not doing anything. It is what it is in the moment, right? You can hear, oh, my portfolio is doing great. No, right now it is. but you a genius putting up a poster board with some huge tariffs away from it looking differently, right? You just never know what's going to happen at any given time. So you want to stay within your target allocations.
That's perfect, Brad. So we're about to dig into the macro balance strategy, right? And the macro balance strategy, as we spoke of before, is a unified way for us to bring forth our insurance, our investments, our risk management pieces, all of those things in a unified strategy, right? But what does it look like? So a balanced accumulation strategies, and these are some of the things that we're going to touch on, touches on risk diversification, tax diversification. We're going to look at what the pre-tax side appears to be and what it looks like in the future. We're going to figure out how to build a tax-free base, okay, while accumulating our assets, above the line tools, as well as how to build a custom target mix that works for you. Now, the first piece of the macro balance strategy is risk diversification. So when we talk about risk diversification, really what we're talking about is the way that you feel, right, about taking on risk, but we're also looking at how much risk you need to be taking within your portfolio based on a number of different factors, and everyone is going to be different. But the risk mix is really made up of two categories, right? Two components with a line in the middle. And what we have is we have above the line assets, which we'll call variable assets, and below the line assets, which we'll call stable assets. And let's look about that a little further. So variable assets are sometimes called paper assets. And Brian, I think you touched on this before. You just touched on it. It's called paper assets because these assets go up and down on what?
Paper.
On paper, right? So that's when we receive that 401k statement at the end of the quarter. That's when we see that brokerage account statement at the end of the quarter. And it may be doing great, right? If we hit a tough spot, it may take a slight correction and goes down, but you're not taking that loss or you're not earning that gain. You're only looking at that on paper. You don't realize it until you sell that asset, okay? Conversely, the assets below the line are considered real assets or stable wealth. Those are assets that generally don't go down, right? They tend to be safer, lower risk, and if push comes to shove, you can press a button or go somewhere and obtain that asset, and you know it's going to be worth exactly what it says today. So we think about that. We think about things like bonds, cash equivalents, that guaranteed income stream that I was talking about, things of that nature. So the next step is how do we figure out what your risk mix or your risk diversification should look like? And like we said, it's different from everyone. But generally speaking, a way that we can look at that is we can use the rule of thumb based on your age. So a rule of thumb says you can deduct your age or take your age and put that same number below the line. So if we have a 20-year-old, she may want 20% of her assets below the line in the stable area, and she has time to grow or time to accumulate, so she may want to put 80% of her assets above the line in the variable area. Does that make sense? So basically what it says is the longer you have to accumulate assets, the more risky you can be, all right? And that's what we're looking at here. Conversely, if we have a very young-looking 80-year-old, she may want 80% of her assets in the stable or the real wealth area and 20% of her assets above the line, all right? Now, we're talking about risk tolerance and risk diversification. I want to introduce another concept to you that we talk about a lot, and that's risk tolerance, right, or risk capacity. And basically what risk capacity says is not how you feel about risk, but really what your portfolio can take on. We used the example earlier of a government employee or a tenured professor or someone who has guaranteed income, right? Let's say that they're expenditures or their costs in retirement are $4,000 a month, and they know that they have $4,000 a month in guaranteed income hitting the mailbox each and every month, they can tend to be a little bit riskier, right? So they may not feel like it, but they have the capacity within their portfolio to take on more risk. So those are also some of the things that we have to take into consideration when talking about risk and risk diversification. So, Brad, you're going to take us into tax diversification?
So the next thing after you get your risk down is looking at tax diversification. So when you look at your house, let's just think about the horizontal diversification here. You're on the left side of the house, you have pre-tax assets, okay? And on the right side of the house, you have after-tax assets. Pre-tax assets are assets that you put in before you actually got the money, right? So you deferred your 401k, 403b, 457s, TSPs, pre-tax assets. After-tax assets is the money that you've already been taxed on, and then you choose to deploy that someplace else. So that could be a Roth 401k, Roth IRAs, investments, brokerage accounts, investment-grade life insurance, whatever it may be on that side. So once you're splitting those things up, you got to take an idea of understanding, again, where tax brackets were. Back in the 1980s, pre-tax plans were popular. Highest marginal tax bracket, 70%. There were actually 15 different tax brackets. If you were making 50 grand back then, you were in a 49% tax bracket. So that's why people deferred income to take it out today, where the highest marginal tax bracket is 37%. Most people's effective tax bracket is somewhere between 20 and 24%. So you gotta ask yourself, does it make sense to continue to defer as much, right? And this is where strategy comes in extremely helpful. So on the left side, if all of your income is coming from pre-tax, you're making $100,000 a year, you're gonna pay $20,000 in taxes, you'll bring home 80 grand. However, if you were diversified and balanced, you could take $50,000 out of the pre-tax and $50,000 from the after-tax side. That $50,000, because it's less than 100, you're actually taxed less because you're taking out less money. You take the other 50 out, instead of bringing home 80 grand, just because of diversification and asset location, you're bringing home almost 20% more than the other person. So that's where designing a strategy where you're on both sides of that tax fence can help you keep more money in your pocket in the future. Now, what does it look like? I would tell you that below the line, we're looking for stable stuff, right? Safety, tax-advantaged liquidity. None of that's really appropriate above the line other than safety, right? Because on the pre-tax side, you already have the tax advantage. It's growing tax deferred anyway, and it's not liquid. You can't touch the money until you're 59 and a half anyway, so generally you have a lot of time. So when we look at what safety looks like above the line, it's a little rocky. It's gonna be a little volatile here and there. But that's okay because over long periods of time, we know that's what keeps pace with inflation. So for that pre-tax money where you have time, the younger people out there who are still growing money, 401ks, 403bs, things of that such, if you have qualified accounts. Some of you have retirement pensions, you got qualified accounts, and you're saying, I don't want to touch it until I have to take my RMD, right? So if you still got time, you can allow that money to grow. You want it to outpace inflation. And if you are working at an employer that matches you and somebody tells you don't take the match, don't walk away from them, run away from them. Take the free money. I have seen those things on Instagram and TikTok with people talking about, don't put your money in a 401k. If they are matching you, take the free money.
Absolutely.
Get it to that match. So find out if your employer's matching 5%, contribute 5%. If they're matching 8%, contribute. Whatever they're matching, get there. Above and beyond the match, we can figure out and get a little fancy, right? But that match, that's 100% rate of return on your money.
And Brad, I think that's important also because when we talk about risk diversification, as I just went over, and we're talking about investing those above the line assets and referencing qualified plans, we're not sure who's out there watching, but in terms of 401ks, 403bs, and things of that nature, understand, like Brad just mentioned, you're not supposed to touch that money till 59 and a half. If if you do, you're going to pay taxes on it, depends where it's at, but you're also going to take a 10% penalty. So if you're 45 years old, you've got 35 years old, and you've got 20 some odd years until retirement, you should most likely be investing aggressively and allowing the market to do its thing over time. We've seen folks that have been in the TSP and the G Fund
Forever.
for 30 years. Right. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that have been lost because they didn't understand where they should be on the risk quadrant in regards to their investments. So if you got time, make your money work for you.
So in general, and again, these are generalizations, everybody's story, but just in general, pre-tax side, let's go above the line, let's go aggressive. We're not, those things are already taken care of on that side. We want growth. When we look on the after-tax side, the first thing we want to do is let's build below the line, and we want a tax-free base, right? We want some money that is out of the tax system. So we want to utilize assets that can do that. Generally, there are 3 asset classes that can get your money out of the tax system. First are Roth assets. Well, that's a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, Roth 403b. I think they even have Roth 457s at this point. But Roth type assets, money grows tax deferred, comes back to you tax free. It's after tax. Tax free muni bonds. Okay, you can also contribute to tax free muni bonds. Generally, muni bonds are for people that want income. Okay, not necessarily an accumulation thing, but for income. And there are some risks that are associated with it. But as long as that bond is bought, we're here in Maryland. So if you bought a Maryland muni bond, you get federal tax relief and you get state tax relief. Muni bonds automatically give you federal, but it has to be in the state that you're filing in for you to get the state tax relief from that bond. The third asset class is cash value life insurance. Cash value life insurance, properly structured, can grow tax deferred, and the monies can come back to you on the tax-free level. So building that tax-free growth, there are 3 assets that will allow you to do that.
And Brad, I just want to sit on that for a second, because if we can give a lot of folks out there a gift, it's to understand and find out whether you have a Roth 401k within your qualified plan at work. It's been a hidden secret for some time.
Yes.
And like Brad said earlier, it's something that they kind of threw in there and kind of changed the rules of the game, right? And it enables you to invest above and beyond the normal Roth IRA limits, because there are income limits on that. And if you make too much money, you can't invest into a Roth IRA, but within that 401k you can. So that is one of the areas where you can achieve tax-deferred growth forever, right? And then bring that money back out tax-free within the qualified plan at your employer.
There's
so you
also
definitely got to look into that.
Required minimum distribution on Roth assets.
That's it.
So you're not forced to take any money out. And there's still inheritance rules for that next generation, but it's still a more preferable asset than traditional IRAs when you're passing it to that next generation. So
absolutely,
getting some money out of there. Now, because of the safety portion here, we're not beating the cover off the balls with rates of returns down below the line. It's the safe asset, right? So we're shooting for somewhere 3, 4, 5% if we can get that. If we can get that tax deferred, though, that is an equivalent to maybe a 6% tax-free, taxable. So if you got money growing 4%, depending on your tax bracket, and you're not paying any taxes on it, it could be a taxable equivalent yield of 6%, which is pretty strong, safe money, right? So we just want to make sure it's growing appropriately and getting appropriate rates of returns. Now, above the line, that's where we're really trying to grab our growth, right? Liquidity, so there's your Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, the Roth assets, the Roth 401k, you still have to wait to 59 and a half. The Roth IRA, believe it or not, if you have a Roth IRA and you've had it for over 5 years, you do have some liquidity there, even if you're not 59 and a half. So if you haven't purchased your first home, you can take $10,000 of the growth for the down payment on that first home. But you can also get what's called your cost basis. That's what you put into it. So let's say you bought a Roth 5 years ago, young person, and you put $5,000 a year into that Roth. You get out, it's worth, let's say, $35,000 now. You can take the 25 that you put in back out to do something without any tax penalties, right? You have access to the principal, and that's different than a traditional IRA Because if you invade a traditional IRA where you get the deduction from it before age 59 and a half, there are some caveats, there are some rules, but in general, it's a 10% penalty, right? So at least there's a little bit more liquidity with the Roth. Stocks and funds, we have to invest more. And we have to understand as a people, if you all had to take a guess, and it's literally, I'll shorten it for you. It's either 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 times. How many times has the S&P 500, the S&P 500, 500 large growth stocks that's been tracked since 1929. So from 1929 to the end of last year, how many times in its history do you believe it's been negative 3 or more years in a row? 3 times. Great Depression, World War II, and the only one any of us has probably lived through, the tech bubble. Not even the financial crisis. Financial crisis was a blip. It was down 1 year, came on back. Most of us remember COVID. You remember what happened in the stock market during COVID? Around March, April, that thing went bungee jumping. And it literally was a bungee jump because by the end of the year, it snapped on back. And if you would have bought through, if you had the ability to buy through COVID, the money that you invested in March, April, you actually, depending on how your money was allocated, you could have earned almost 50% on those dollars because it was down negative about 30+%, and it finished positive 16. So we have to, as I was explaining earlier in the presentation, we gotta participate in the equity markets more to make our monies grow. Business ventures. Business ventures. There's a lot of money that's been made by people starting businesses. Now, my young people, don't go to your job tomorrow and quit to start your side hustle.
Uncle Brad said.
Uncle Brad said, I quit my job. No, I did not, right? But it is okay to develop a business plan. It is okay to put out some market feelers to see if people actually want your idea. It is okay to develop and to start to see where the demand is. And if that demand says, hey, yes, I can go start that business venture, go for it. Real estate. Real estate, ownership, purchasing, investment, that's a great way to begin to build wealth. But as you see, all of those things that are above the line, we call them paper assets because you don't necessarily know the value. Over long term, they generally work themselves out. But there are many of us who owned real estate in 07, 08, and 09. And we saw that it did not get back to where it was that we purchased it till about 2018, 19, right? It took some time. So you don't necessarily know. You want to be diversified, but you also want a strategy where you're reallocating and beginning to funnel these assets down into real wealth. So when your real estate is doing well, take some of those gains and move it down to those stable assets, lock them in, let it keep going. When the investments are doing well, take some of those gains, funnel them down to the stable assets, let them keep moving. That way you're more positioned when, and it's not if, when the next whatever market turmoil is going to look like happens. We never know what it's going to look like, but it's guaranteed that it is going to come. So the more assets that you have that are stable, that are not correlated to market corrections, the better off you are to take advantage of those. Think about the people that actually had cash during the last housing market crash. They bought things up for pennies on a dollar and now are sitting very well versus the people who were too over leveraged and couldn't keep up with their payments. So you
Brian,
want a strategy.
before you move on, I think one of the things that a lot of people may think of when they see the above-the-line assets, again, they think about risk and things of that nature, but all of those things really and truly have a high probability of success, right? They have a high probability of success. As you said, the stock market has only been down 3 years in a row, 3 times in history. Real estate over time goes up in value. But it has to be part of a long-term strategy. If you've got time, most things work out. But as we've determined and as we see within our community, we sometimes don't understand the difference between saving, investing, and gambling, right? We talk about those below-the-line assets. Sometimes that may be where our savings are. If we need to touch something, we can go there, right? Investing, that's going to be a little longer term. If we don't have 5 years at least, chances are we should not be investing those dollars, right? If you may need to touch it tomorrow, chances are they shouldn't be invested because we don't know where the market shift or when the market shift is going to happen. In gambling, that's another story.
The question was, are having CDs good for stable money? Nothing is good or bad until you compare it to something.
That's right.
So if all of your savings is in CDs, I probably could make an argument that, hey, we want to diversify a little bit. There's some other assets out there where we could get stability and probably get a higher yield. If you told me that your entire portfolio, because we run into people that have significant amounts of money in CDs just because they don't know any better. It's just where it can go. We probably want to do some diversification. But CDs are better than having the money under your mattress. It's better than being in a savings account or that's earning 0.0000001%, right? So whatever we're comparing it to, that's what we want to look at. But nothing's good or bad until you compare it. Okay. So annual asset reallocation, what you can do is you can look at your portfolio every year, see how things are growing, and then determine how much you need to filter down. Do we need to increase on one side or the other? How we want to maneuver assets appropriately so that you're staying within your mix. So let's say somebody wants to be 50-50. 50% on the pre-tax side, 50% on the after-tax side. Well, we already know on that pre-tax side, probably going to go a little aggressive. So we'll push that above the line, right? So we don't want anything stable on that side because of the time horizon that we have associated with it. So on the after-tax side, we probably put that on the stable side, right? We would be a little bit more stable there, let that grow, more liquidity, tax deferral, tax preferred assets. However, some people might say, look, I want to be 75-25. Great. 50% on that side, we stack it up, 25-25, we keep it moving. Depending on how much you're earning, sometimes you don't have a choice because the pre-tax side has limits. IRS is only going to say you can put X amount over here on the pre-tax side, so sometimes we're forced to move money on that after-tax side and start doing different things with it to make it move and grow the way that we want it to grow. But the key is set your target. What are your objectives? What's your time horizon, as my brother spoke about a little bit earlier, and what's your risk tolerance, right? Understand, earning wealth, growing money is a lot like getting in shape. And I am A shape, but I'm still trying to get in shape. But the person who does 10 push-ups a day will be in much better shape than the person that does 100 push-ups once a month. What does that mean? For those of you who are getting ready to start your wealth journey, you'll come out better saving $100 a month every month than waiting until you got 5,000 or what you think 10,000 is going to be later on. The person that invests $10,000 today and puts nothing behind it will have less money than the person that invests $100 a month.
That's right.
Compounding and dollar cost averaging. I can show you the math. So as one of the slides we showed earlier, start. The sooner you start, the better. What's your name again, sir? Yes, Alan. Alan said earlier, the younger we can get people to start, great. But the good news is pharmaceutical medicine is getting to be phenomenal. So whether you all like it or not, most of y'all going to live much longer than you think because they got a pill for that. Something that's going to help you make it. And y'all going to go get it. It just is what it is. None of us are trying to leave here any earlier than we have to. So you're going to be here a lot longer than you think. Tax deductible investing. So we got Robbie and Robin. Some of y'all will get that. Now, both of them are earning $100,000 a year. Robbie is all about pre-tax. So he puts $4,000 in his 401k. His taxable income is $96,000. Hypothetical tax at 25%, he pays $24,000. He brings home $72,000. Robin likes after tax. So she earns $100,000. She pays her tax up front. She gets $75,000, and she has $3,000 to invest because she paid the 25% tax on that $4,000, so that's $3,000. She's bringing home $72,000. So all things remaining equal, depending on how much you're putting up, you can bring home the same amount of money. But here's where the rubber really hits the road. So I'm gonna flip through 4,000, balance at retirement. So let's say they both have $400,000 on Robbie's side. Robin has $300,000 at retirement. They need to get some income. So if he was to liquidate and just take the whole $400,000, he'd have to pay taxes. He'd net $300,000. Robin's already paid her taxes, so she would bring home $300,000. But in general, most of us need a little bit of income, right? So let's say, and 10% withdrawal rates are pretty high. Let's just get that out there.
Probably don't want to do that.
Probably don't want to do that, but in this scenario, it makes our math easy. Gonna pay $10,000 in taxes, net $30,000. All things remaining equal, doesn't matter what you do. Where it does matter is here. If taxes go down, Robbie wins. So if taxes go down in the future, Robbie wins. But what did we just talk about when we started this conversation? We got a whole lot of debt as a country.
A lot of debt.
Right? So if taxes go up, Robin's winning. What we're telling you all today is don't have all your eggs on one side of the tax fence.
That's right.
Be diversified. There is nothing that we see people hate more. And we're having this conversation a lot around this time of year. Our retirees who have all of their money in taxable vehicles. My mother is 82. And if it wasn't for me knowing her accountant, the people would probably be knocking at her door because she hates paying taxes.
That's right.
She doesn't understand why she got to do it. She feel like she shouldn't have to write this check. I done worked all this time, and this is unacceptable. You're not going to make me do it. So my brothers and I end up having to stroke checks at times because this woman says she's going to do the Wesley Snipes. She ain't paying them.
She ain't paying.
Right. Come see me. Right. And because we don't want mom locked up, I don't think she built for that life. We have to pay them taxes for her. So make sure you're diversified.
And Brad, not to bring the rain tonight, but I have to bring it up since we have an audience. Another thing that we need to think about is extended health care.
Yes.
Okay? Long-term care planning. And the reason why I thought about that is because I also think of clients who've had all of their money in qualified plans, right? They did not prepare for extended health care or long-term care events. Now they're 75, 80, have to draw from those qualified plans to pay for long-term care. So you're being taxed on the money that you have to pull out in order to pay for the long-term care that you never had to think that you had to pay for in the first place. That's a really, really bad situation.
And it becomes a revolving cycle.
Yeah.
Because every time you take the money out, you got to pay taxes on that money. And if that's the only place where you got money, where are you going to get the money to pay the taxes? Back out of that same account. So it just keeps snowballing, 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 depletion of assets.
So.
You want to go?
Yeah, yep. So to really break everything down, we've talked about a strategy, right? That's going to allow you to bring all of the moving pieces of your financial puzzle together. We've talked about risk, we've talked about asset allocation, and really what it boils down to is going through a process. So if folks come to us to speak to us, we're going to go over their financial EKG. We're then going to expose them or look at their risk exposure, right, as it pertains to their risk tolerance, but also their risk capacity, as we discussed before. We're going to look at their tax situation. We go through something called a tax efficiency checklist. We try to see how much money you have on the pre-tax side, how much money you have on the after-tax side, and really try to figure out, do we need to take some money out of one pocket, one tax pocket, and move it to another tax pocket so you can flourish throughout your financial lifetime. We look at your target mix. Think about reallocating some assets if necessary, and then ultimately take a look at your strategy annually as we go through the process. So, go ahead, Brad. As Brad mentioned, of course, we are Reveal Wealth. This is a pleasure of ours to be able to educate you all, to educate our people. If you would like to have an initial consultation with us, please feel free to scan that QR code. You should be able to see that in YouTube land as well. It's going to hit you a link where you can get on our calendars and we can, speak about your specific situation a little bit more in depth.
And we always tell people conversations cost nothing, right? So don't think there's a paywall between good information and you getting getting some help on doing things more efficiently for yourselves. Thank everybody for coming out. I believe we're right about an hour. We're going to hang out with the people in the crowd. I'm not sure what Eli's going to do on the tech side and the YouTube world, but thank everybody for showing up. We appreciate you. We hope you learned something, and if you want more information, we're here for you. We're going to take questions. Yes, sir.
I've been in the financial services arena for several years. I work at a bank, and one of my jobs was selling 401ks and 403bs to hospitals and school districts. But the one thing that I'm an advocate of doing is teaching our young kids, our children, our grandchildren about money.
That's right.
Basically taking them to the bank, open up a savings account. That's the basic. And then from that point on, let them understand what financial literacy is and what you guys, what they'll graduate when they'll get a job, and they'll understand more vividly about what you're talking about today. But one of the things I see as a tragedy is a lot of our people, they don't do it, or they don't know how to do it, or they make excuses of why they can't do it. But if we can get our young people early on, because obviously in the school systems, financial literacy is not a priority, and I almost think it's a conspiracy. But I think that if we educate our young people, particularly our kids and grandkids, and then pass it on, then we'll be better as a society, as a community.
Amen.
I'll piggyback that with parents, grandparents. Practice a little exercise with your kids when they want something, right? So if they want an Xbox, ask them, do you want to own an Xbox, or would you like to own the company that owns Xbox, right? Because for what it is that we're paying for that Xbox, what, about $1,000? I don't know.
Let's go with $750.
Right, $750 to $1,000. You probably could buy a share or two, right? You can own that and allow that to grow, and you can allow that child to watch how that works, to begin to, we got to teach our children, we have to teach our people to buy appreciating assets, not depreciating assets. The more assets that we're purchasing that appreciate over time, the wealthier we will be as a community, period. And then you can impact change and do a lot of things from that point, because in America, dollars speak. So he lives independently?
What?
He lives independently? he buying the groceries?
Yeah. So anyway, I have a question as it concerns like our people, other groups. Let's put it that way. They like invest in real estate, or maybe they even all live in the same house, generational and so forth. And you're talking about appreciating assets. What's your take on that or opinion on that? Because it seems as though us as people, we don't always subscribe to that. We have maybe one family in a household, and other groups have, mom's there, grandma's there, and this one is there, and they're building wealth in a sense, like in that sense.
So, Brian could probably expound a little bit more and get deeper, but number one, I agree that we have not historically done that as much, but I will say that I see a sea shift change, right? We're seeing more multiple generation families together in the same household. Now, is that because of what we want to do? Is that a long-term strategy, or is that because of necessity, right? That's another story, but we are seeing more of that. So I think now we have to begin to entertain the idea of utilizing that space, right, or utilizing that position that we're now in to excel further with the paradigm shift, right? Maybe everyone not moving in the same household but spending the same way as they normally would as if they were alone, but maybe taking one of those paychecks in that household and investing it on a monthly basis in order to make everyone rise, right? So that's my thought
and
on
what
that.
you just spoke on is those communities have a strategy.
Strategy.
You
There
gotta
go.
have a strategy.
What's
and
the strategy?
I'm a big proponent of giving the next generation an opportunity to try. I'm standing in front of you today because my mother and father gave me an opportunity to try. They allowed me to go on my quote unquote entrepreneurial bent. But there were caveats to this. My father looked me in my face and said, hey, I want you to take this opportunity to go into this career field. However, you better be out of the house before I leave every morning, and you can't come back in here before I do. Because nobody in here is buying anything from you till you've proven you can do this for a little bit. So I couldn't just sit in the house on my shoulders. I had to get outside and go do something. And all too often, we take advantage of the opportunity to try, and then we punish everybody else behind us because of one bad apple. So my wife will tell you, and my nieces know, they can always stay with Uncle Brod as long as they're being productive members of society. There's a sign at our home when you walk down the steps. It says, do something. Everybody that live under this roof gonna do something. And as long as a community, we understand that we gotta be doing something positive, productive, getting out there, yes, we should be able to open up homes and allow people to come and build and have a strategy of where these funds are gonna go. Are we gonna put the money up so that we can buy another piece of property so that two of y'all can get on up out of here, right? But we don't want you out of here saddled with debt, right? We want you to move out and have that thing moving so you can continue to save so the next person, so now that we're all owning it, and we can still come as community, family, and community starts in your four walls, right? That's the first place where your community is, your four walls. Take care of those four walls first. The stronger you are within those four walls, the stronger you're gonna be out in the community. But if within your four walls you're a tragedy, it's tragic to the community. Well, we gotta be here, so go ahead.
I think another thing that as parents, as you have young adults who are working, that they really need to emphasize the fact that if you're working for a company who has a 401k, that you need to max out whatever the match is that they're giving.
Absolutely.
So if they're saying, I'll give you 3%, but you gotta put 3% in.
You need to put the 3% in.
Our young people.
Yes.
That's free, I call it free 99.
Free 99.
Yeah, all day long.
$3.99.
Yep.
And that means you have to put in your 3%, and you're going to get 3%. So it's a miss because a lot of companies, I don't know too many companies now that have a pension plan.
Correct.
So if you don't get it through your 401k and whatever additional the company might be giving an employee, you're going to miss out.
That's a great, so it used to be what's called a three-legged stool, right? You remember that. You were selling 401ks. I know you remember that, right? So you had your pension, you had Social Security, and you had your savings, right? Well, that three-legged stool, it might be one in a shaky one, right? We believe Social Security is not going anyplace. As my brother said, it's going to be around that demographic, that voter block votes. Now, you might not get what you see on your statement, right? It might be 70 cents on the dollar. They might push the age out, but it'll be something there. Pensions, short of you working for state, feds, municipalities, things of that such, private sector, pensions are gone. It's flipped over. It is on you and your personal savings. So you are correct. If you are not taking the incentives, and there's some companies that have phenomenal matches and things of that such with their 401ks. If you're not taking advantage of that early, like you said, take advantage of at least the match. And then I would encourage specifically those people that have the blessing to be able to still stay at home. Begin to learn to pay yourself first. You know, I tell young people, if y'all just put up a brunch a month, because y'all some brunching people, right? If they put up a brunch a month, they really could begin to accumulate some money. But again, it goes back to we have to learn to love ourselves, and we have to learn to see that there's value in ourselves. The reason we don't invest money to grow for ourselves is because we don't understand our worth. And if you think about it, nobody's really told us that we're worth anything within this environment. We're usually told the exact opposite. So when you're told you ain't worth nothing, you generally spend your money on things that you think are worth something, right? So that's where there's nothing wrong with us as a community, other than we don't realize that there's nothing wrong with us as a community. We were brought here to make other people rich. That's literally why they brought us here. And we still do it masterfully today. When we understand that we are original people and that we are the ones who, in that book, they talk about lands of milk and honey, those are our lands. There's nothing wrong with us getting back to that. But we have to begin to put our money into places where it's going to work for us and not continue to make everybody else rich. And not knowing isn't the answer anymore. There's not a person under 30 that can tell me they don't know.
That's why her grandson said he knows everything
That's why
about
your
money.
grandson think he know everything, right? So let me help you, brother. You created in God's image, okay? Right? And I totally believe in tithing. The tithe is the core of it all. So yes, your money needs to go. It's God's money in the first place, right? Yeah. That's. Mm-hmm. Yes. I'll even take you a step further. Like you said, tithing is not the ceiling. So it's your time, your talent, and your money, right? But no, you can't separate them. Because the problem is we don't spend enough time cultivating our talents, which will help us make more money. We spend too much of our time watching Housewives. We know what's going on with the playoffs. We trying to know what's going on in his house, in her house. I'm just in general, right? We don't. So I'm bringing you back to this context. We got to spend our time cultivating the talents that the Lord gave us so we can magnify him more within society. That, whether that's being how we present and show up in spaces and places, that being how we are able to take care of our families, whether it's financially, emotionally, spiritually. But it's all, we can rock. It's all biblical. The Bible talks about money more than it talks about a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. Right. So you are definitely correct. Right. I believe in any context, if you understand that all things are possible. Not everybody understands. I said for me, and my wife will tell you, I don't really stress on what goes on outside my house. In my house, you're going to understand. And if you don't believe me, you can ask her. When we opened up our business, before we made a dime, the first thing I told her to do was schedule our tithes weekly. She said, baby, how much should I put up? Because you ain't made a dime yet. I said, look at what we did last year and base it off that. We will figure it out. Mm-hmm. Right. But
it's okay.
Well, the other thing is he's 16, and who of us at 16 to 22 didn't think we knew everything until we got to about 32, and then we said, dog, maybe my parents weren't as silly as I thought they were. Maybe they knew something, right? So prayerfully, you'll tell them next time, okay, if you stay home, I'm going to shut the Wi-Fi off. You stay home without the Wi-Fi while I go get this message. Because I've been around a little bit longer and I've seen money a little bit longer than you. So if you know everything, you'll know how to work out without this Wi-Fi. Since you know everything. And then he'd probably jump in the car with you. Because he ain't got no Wi-Fi. I mean, so you could have a lot of fun with this. If I'm you, I encourage you to have a whole lot of fun with this. I don't pay for anything for Youngblood for a while. Since he know everything. You said you know everything about money. Great. Let me get all these clothes out your closet because you know how to go buy them. You're going to figure out how you're going to get to school. You know everything. If you know everything about money, you don't need me, right? You don't need me. So the next time I invite you to come spend some time with the hand that's feeding you, even if you do know, wisdom tells you to keep that to yourself right now and come on in here and learn, right? So, yeah, but we definitely, I'll talk to Pastor Matt. We can go through biblical scripture and correlate that to how planning works. But it all starts with God, right? And investing in yourself. When I say, again, I'm always operating. When I say you come first, I'm really saying God comes first because I believe that you are created in God's image. Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's not just you. It's a reality.
It just may be our relationship with money is off, so we're chasing those depreciable assets and not even thinking about past our thumbs.
So I'm going to relate it back to what you said. Our relationship with God is off.
And that's why I said, that's why I started off with
Yeah.
that first. This
Because
change
our
in language
relationship-
is he should be first. That's why I brought that up.
Because
just
our
for me.
relationship with God is off, we don't understand where true value lies.
Yes.
And the book says you can't serve God and mammon at the same time. Too many of us are trying to serve mammon, but those of us that have lived a little bit longer, and I still got some ways to go, prayerfully, Lord, give me some ways to go. But the one thing I have learned along my way is God's way is so much better than mine. And it takes some bumping your head and some reflection to recognize that. But once you do recognize that, like you said, it will change your thought process. I sat down, I talked to my wife one time, probably a good 15, 20 years ago. I sat down with her and made a conscious decision that we're not paying anybody else more than we tithe and more than we save and invest for ourselves. We're going to tithe and offering more between our home church, between my mom's church, between God rest her soul and her grandmother and grandfather who are alive. We're going to save and tithe more than we are going to spend on cars, clothes, whatever it may be. Because that's where I see the true value. And when we and it wasn't an overnight shift. Right? It took paying some stuff down, getting out of this, getting back, reallocating. But once we started living that way, it's like you said, floodgates began to open up. Well, I don't know if we're still online. We good? I don't know. Eli, we still online? We are. So, do you got any questions back there? All right, we're good. Yes, ma'am.
I know you do not have a crystal ball, but
I wouldn't be here standing in front of you in this cold weather right now if I did.
I think that we can all agree that right now with our 401ks, when we look at our 401ks, if we are taking more risk with our 401ks, we're doing very well.
Yes.
And I do believe that is because of the administration that we have, so that our current administration can get richer,
The reality of it is, whether it's red or blue over any 4-year period of time, markets generally go up. And actually, when you look at it historically, blue administrations outperform red administrations by about a basis point or two. And not, you are doing well. If you over the long run, you're gonna do well. What I would tell you is you gotta know what's your exit strategy.
That was my question.
Right? So you got to determine when do we begin, and real story. So during the pandemic, we were talking, and I think we both bought some shares of Royal Caribbean. And Royal Caribbean tanked during the pandemic. As of late last year, I think my Royal Caribbean position was up like 854%, some ridiculous number. And I'm looking at it with my educated light saying, hey man, you won. Take some of these gains, filter it down to real money, and let's let it go. But my worldly side was like, man, it could go higher. I might miss out. And I forced myself to take some gains, and it literally maybe 2 weeks later corrected. It has since come back up, but I didn't sell it all. So moral of the story is, don't get greedy. I've never seen an investor get upset because they took some gains and missed out on a little bit more of a run. I've seen plenty of people beat themselves up because they held on too long. Now, caveat there is if you're not retiring for another 20 years, man, keep buying. Keep buying. But if you're looking at the front door in the next 3 to 5, you might want to start taking some of those gains, because retirement is about income. But when you're living off assets, average rate of return is not the same thing as it is when you're pulling money out. So for example, if you got $1 million, right, and you need $80,000 a year, you take $80,000 out, generally you got $920. But if the market corrects by 20%, you don't have $920 anymore. You have about $720. So do this little exercise with your family and friends over the next holiday gathering. If you got $100 and you lose 50%, how much money do you have? How much? $50. What rate of return do you need to make in order to get that 50 back to $100? 100%. Most people will tell you 50% because that's what they lost. You see, losses take more to get back even. Now imagine that same $100, you got to live off of $20 and it loses 30%. But you still got to live off $20 next year. So that's why in those first few years of retirement, we always tell people, it's probably safe to have 2 or 3 years of what you need for retirement income if you don't have pensions and other things factoring in there, right? But it's probably safe to have 2 or 3 years of what you're going to need specifically in those first few years. Go ahead on the sideline. You want that safe and stable. Because if there is a correction, you don't have to lock in the loss. You see, if you got $1 million and it corrects by 15%, you're down to $850 and you got to sell, you just locked in that loss. But if you got $1 million and it corrects to $850 and you had the money you needed on the sideline to where you didn't have to sell, when the market rebounds, which it typically does within a 2-3 year period, you didn't lock in the loss because it's just on paper until you lock it in. So that's where diversification comes in and having money in different buckets. You don't have to necessarily, and I'm speculating here, you don't necessarily have to get all out, but you might want to start taking some of the gains, put them in a stable value, someplace where it's earning some interest, because you know that's going to be the first money I withdraw when I get to retirement. I need that money to be there. The rest of the money, I keep buying through, and I let it do what it needs to do.
So to add on to that, and I know that there are some folks out there that have the same question. So that was a phenomenal question, but you started it out perfectly. And that's one of the things that we always talk about with our clients. You said, I know you don't have a crystal ball, right? And you're absolutely right. And for that reason, if someone says that they know what's going to happen, right? They know what's going to happen, don't walk away, run away. If we could leave you with something, and I don't know if someone else has any questions, but as it pertains to that, what we like to do is not try to predict, but prepare.
Correct. We
Right?
don't
So if
predict,
you can't
we prepare.
predict, but we can prepare for if things go one way or another. And it goes back to that word strategy and making sure that you have clarity about your specific situation.
So we had a question they wanted to know, was the presentation going to be available? Please, if you can, contact us. We'll work with it. We can't just distribute it randomly to the public. We got compliance. I'm sure you remember compliance. We got compliance things that we just can't push stuff out there. But if somebody wants more of this information, contact us so we can get it to you in a format of which you can look through it and see what you need to see.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that, probably, I think I missed it because I got confused on the time when we started, but what was your take on crypto again?
So here's my take. There are 5 core things that most of the wealthy people we know have, right? Number 1, they have business interest in some capacity. They earn something in a business, so on and so forth. 2, they probably married to somebody that got a W-2 job, right? That's where they're getting their benefits from because it's cheaper on that W-2 job benefits. 3, they have investments, right? Some type of investment portfolio. 4, they own some type of real estate, whether that might be the business that they're in, so on and so forth, but they got some type of real estate. Number 5, they have insurance portfolios. So they have some type of insurance, permanent, term, whatever it may be, but they have some type of insurance portfolios. Built around that is all the other stuff, right? That's your crypto, your Forex, your cousin's hustle, your private equity, whatever it is that you want to do around those things, because all of those things are speculative, right? And when it comes to crypto, I always laugh at it in the sense of, and I own crypto, so I'm not bad-mouthing it, right? I'm not some crypto genius, but we bought some a while back, and I'll open it up and see what it's worth in 2035. It's a long play for me, and it's not a significant portion of my portfolio. If it all goes away, I'm okay. But the crazy thing I always see with crypto is, do you all remember what Bitcoin was trading at in 2022? Who could tell me? Most people don't know. Why? Because the Bitcoin streets were quiet in 2022. Why? Because it was trading at $15,000. 15, 16,000. You could have bought it back then. Streets was quiet. You could hear a mouse in the church. When it went to 100,000, everybody want to talk about it. Remember what we said the rule is? Buy low, sell high. So you had all them people jumping in at 100, 90, 108, 99. And what is it doing now? It's correcting. And the streets are what now? Quiet. So if you believe in it, why aren't you buying it when it's low? Now, the functional issue with Bitcoin is this. It was supposed to be an asset that wasn't correlated to normal markets. It was supposed to be a hedge, digital gold. It behaved differently. But what history has shown us and what we're seeing is it does have some functionality, but it's not behaving as a hedge. It generally runs lock and step with what markets do. So there's been some trepidation on, is that asset operating the way that it's supposed to be operating? Now, emerging markets, third world countries love it because you know what it's worth generally, right? When you're in a hyperinflation environment, when you look at some countries, some sub-Saharan African countries, right, where you can wake up and bread this morning was 1,000 Zimbabwe, whatever, and that afternoon it's 1 million Zimbabwe. So you don't know what your money's worth. You kind of know what the Bitcoin's worth, though. So if you can buy it with Bitcoin, so on and so forth, I know with this tangible asset, it's a scarce asset. They're only making so much of it, so on and so forth. And but when you have stable currency markets, it's a little bit harder for people to buy into it, 1. 2, until people really recognize how it's taxed and it's integrated into our economic systems. Bottom line, when it comes to the American economy, in my opinion, until institutions really get behind it, not your fringe institutions, institutions. So you can look up some of the comments from people like Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase, gentleman that runs BlackRock, so on and so forth. They've created Bitcoin ETFs because of the demand, but they don't necessarily believe in the asset, right? They'll make the money on it, but they don't necessarily believe in that asset. So until institutions really get behind it, until you get better regulations, they still looking for Sam Bankman-Fried money, right? We don't know where that comes from. So it's kind of hard to get seasoned investors to buy into something that I can't tell you what it's worth. I can't tell you what it's backed by, and if it just disappears, I don't even have anybody to yell at. How much money are you really gonna put there, right? Now, speculators, enjoy yourselves, right? Speculators will do it all day. So is it bad, good? I don't know. But I would tell you, don't mortgage your house and put it all in there.
So, Rod, it fits in the scheme that we spoke about before. Saving, investing, and
Gambling.
gamble, right? And another way to say gamble in certain areas and frameworks is speculative.
Right.
We don't know what's going to happen. It really doesn't have a proven track history of success.
Most rules of thumb say no more than 5% of your overall net worth there, right? 5% allocated. So if your liquid net worth's $1 million, you can put 50 grand into crypto. If your liquid net worth is $10,000, I tell you, keep saving money. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's stages to this, right? Our people want to get to running before we can really crawl well. So, oh, I want to get into private equity. No, you really don't. Because first of all, you got to be a qualified investor, right? And that's even better than an accredited investor. Second of all, do you know most of it doesn't have really good liquidity? So whatever you put over there, you generally got to hold it for 5 to 7 years before you can touch it. And they going to tell you when you can exit.
Yep.
It's not up to you. It's up to them when it does what it does. So when you hear all these people that are making all this money in venture and blah, 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 those are generally people that have a lot of money. So if I got a loose mill, I can throw 100,000 at 10 different ventures. I only need one to go, right? Because if one goes 20x, I win. But if all you got is $10,000, you need to put that.
You need to be private with your equity.
You need to be private with your equity, right? right. You need to be real private with your equity. And keep saving some money. Don't believe me, Google it yourself. Google what percentage of day traders actually make money. And there's a reason why it's called trading and investing. It's two different words. It's two different things. And, you know, you'll hear people talking about it when they're winning. Look, it's like going to the casino. You can get hot, right? You can get hot. But you stay in there too long, the probability of you coming out on top. It's a reason they got golden chandeliers and free drinks, right? So there are some people that can make money trading. They are there. It's just not a lot of people. It's just not a lot of people. It's just not the high probability of success. We like to steer our clients towards places that have higher probabilities of success over longer periods of time. Once you get that core, cool. If you want to gamble around it, great. Really what you're looking for is you got to get to where you snowball. We got a client that it took this person 20 years to save $500,000. 20 years to save $500,000. I can show it to you. Over the last 5, that $500,000 has almost grown to $1 million. So it took him 20 years to get to half, and it's taken him about 5 to double it. Compounding and snowballing and caught up with him now, right? But if he didn't do what he did over the previous 20, he never got to that effect to where the compounding can happen. And he laughs when we talk to him because he's tried everything. Everything, you name it, from, I don't know if y'all remember back when we went into Iraq and it was the Iraqi dinar that you could buy and that was gonna blow up and make me, he still has some Iraqi dinar in a drawer. It's worthless, right? So if it was a come up or a thing, he did it. But what he also did was systematically put money up every month into an asset that had a high probability of success, and that's the asset where he got more money than anything else he ever tried. So I don't discourage people if you want to try some stuff, but I do encourage people to do that systematic. It's like I said about working out. Just walk 10 minutes every day. You can do your CrossFit once a week. You can just walk 10 minutes every day and watch how your health looks. Investing is a lot the same. The other thing I encourage people to do is do the things that you understand, right? If you got to take 42 courses and, pay somebody $72.99 per month to try to help you figure out how to do what they say they did, but they going to teach you how to do it. And it's like, really, if you were doing it, why you got so much time to teach me how to do it? It's chill out. Stay in your lane. Stay in stuff that's it does not have to be complex to get wealthy, right? It does not have to be rocket science. God bless y'all. Traveling mercies. Thank y'all for coming out.
Thank you.